So this first unit is actually a review unit, and really all we're going to review is what's important from middle school to continue on in grade 9. And it's basically all 4 operations with positive and negative numbers, and it's all 4 operations with fractions, and it's some geometry like area and perimeter. And that's really what we're just going to cover in the first unit. And we'll probably work through it fairly quickly, depending on how you guys did with the assessment. But anyway, let's start with something called integers. That's a fancy name. What's an integer?
A whole number that has positive or negative.
Okay, whole number that's positive or negative. Perfect. Okay. So whole number. And whole number means it doesn't have a fraction or decimal. Those are different. We call those different numbers. Okay. That is positive or negative. There's a number that's a whole number that doesn't, it's not positive and it's not negative. 0. So we want to make sure also 0. So examples would be just pick a negative and pick a whole number. So negative 10. 0. And for positive, 7. We normally don't write the positive sign in front when it's positive. Okay. So that's what I'm referring to when I talk about integers. And something that you hopefully did a fair amount of in middle school and are pretty comfortable with is how to do all 4 operations with integers. Adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing. So we'll start with adding and subtracting. Again, just a few simple rules. You may have learned it a slightly different way. Go with the way that you know it. Okay, but basically, if you have 2 positive numbers that you're adding together, you just add the numbers and the answer is positive. Okay, that's pretty straightforward. You've been doing that for a long time. So this one would be, just say it, 11. The next one, well, think of this like you're doing -5 and -6. So if we're combining, because really subtraction is just a form of adding. When you subtract something, you're adding the negative of something. Okay, so you've got a -5 and a -6, which together make -11. So when we add 2 negatives, the answer is going to be negative, and then we just add the numbers. Or another way you can look at it, think of it like a thermometer or something. You're at -5, and you go down another 6. So you're going further into the negatives, right? And negatives is kind of opposite world. The bigger the number that has a negative, the smaller it is. Like -100 is much smaller than -1. Okay. What about if we add and subtract positives and negatives? Somebody want to explain how they would do this one? What their thinking is? -4 plus 7. We got a negative, we got a positive favorite.
Like if you were to lose $4 and then find 7. It's a positive 3.
Perfect. Well done. Okay. Some people think that when we add a positive and a negative, subtract the 2 numbers, subtract the bigger from the smaller, and then whatever bigger number had the positive or negative in front of it, that's the sign of the answer. So I would think 7 minus 4, but there's more positives. Okay, so 7 minus 4 is 3, but there's more positives, so the answer is 3.
Take two of those. Take two of those.
Or one of each, sorry.
Here, you can apply an inverse thinking.
Okay? Or you can think of it like 8 minus 5, but which one has more negatives? The 8, right? So the answer is going to be negative. So what's our answer going to be?
Negative.
Because it's the difference between the two numbers, the bigger minus the smaller, but there's more negatives.
Okay.
What about if you're adding a string, adding and subtracting a string of numbers? Well, I mean,
You can start from the left and move to the right, so you can go -4 plus 8. Get that answer, then add 5. Get that answer, then -3. Get that answer, and -9.
that'll work.
I have a question. Could you add all the minuses together?
Yeah,
Another way to look at it is put all the negatives together. And we get -4 and -3 and -9, which is -16. Put all the positives together, +8 and +5, which is +13.
and then add those two together.
Or in other words, 16 minus 13, but there's more negatives. So your answer would be -3.
How about the next one? Notice anything that you could do to make life easier? Remember, mathematicians are lazy. We're always looking for things to make life easier. Anything? Julia?
There's a positive 56 and a negative 56. Will that would be 0?
You bet. Those just cancel each other out, so we don't even need them in the question. So now it's just 9 subtract 5 subtract 3.
Which is pretty straightforward.
Anyone? 1.
Is your answer.
Sometimes when we add and subtract negatives, we may have two signs beside each other, separated by, and by the way, I always call these parentheses. Brackets have a different look. Brackets are the square ones. Okay? Some people just call them all brackets. I suppose that's okay, but I'm always going to use parentheses. So when we encounter a question like this, we want to combine the two signs into either addition or subtraction. And you can follow these rules. 2 pluses, if you add a positive, obviously that's plus. If you add a negative or subtract a positive, that's the same as minus. And if you subtract a negative, that's the same as plus. So what's an easier way to write this without parentheses? 6 minus 10. Because a plus and a minus make a minus. And now we're back to questions we did before. We've already done it. What would the answer to this be?
-4. What would this question look like without the parentheses and the signs combined, Romy? Which is? Good.
And this one?
7 plus 8, which is 15. Good. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
One more before we go on to more than one or more than two. What would this look like without parentheses?
Right. Remember, if there's no sign in front, you always assume plus. So plus minus make a minus. Two negatives turn into addition. So we get negative 4 plus 2, which is negative 2.
Apply the same thinking if you're adding a whole bunch of numbers in parentheses and with two signs beside each other.
What would this whole thing look like without parentheses? Wait. Just say it. So, oh, okay, hang on, minus 5, plus 6, plus 4, minus 7, which gives us there's a couple answers. This is 1, 5, 5 minus 7 is negative 2.
Okay. So that's a quick look at adding and subtracting. Multiplying and dividing, they follow the same rules when we have parentheses and we're adding or subtracting. If you multiply two positives, it's a positive answer. And then you just multiply the numbers like they don't have signs. If you multiply two negatives, it's also positive. If you multiply a positive by a negative or a negative by a positive, the answer is negative.
So really, all you have to do
with these ones is just 3 times 7, and is the answer positive or negative?
Yeah, so it'd be positive. Next answer? Negative 30. Negative 5. 2. Or positive 2.
You don't need to write the positive. Okay, that's pretty straightforward.
We're still going to see this division sign a little bit,
But we're going to start getting away from it.
okay? To represent division, we're going to use the division bar a lot more, just so you know.
What would you do if you had a string that you're multiplying together? Okay. Sure. Right, because if you think about it, when you're multiplying a whole bunch of numbers together, if there's an odd number of negatives, like 1 negative, 3 negatives, 5 negatives, 7 negatives, so on, the answer has to be negative. If it's an even number of negatives, well, every 2 negatives multiplied is going to make positive. So if you have 2 negatives in there, the answer is going to be positive. If you have 4 negatives in there, the answer is still going to be positive.
So is this one positive or negative? And then you just multiply like the signs aren't even there. 4 times 2 times 1 times 2 times 2. Anybody? 8, 16, 32. Good.
This next one may be something new to you.
I'm going to say 0 divides 7.
And 7 divides 0. So it all depends if we're dividing 0 by a number or dividing a number by 0. 0 divides 7. What do you think? Crickets. What do you think? 0. So whenever we divide 0 by a number, okay, the answer is always 0. But what's 7 divides 0? Undefined. We don't know what the answer is.
And why
Is that the case?
Well,
Think of it this way.
if I divided 10 divided by 2, what do I get? 5. If I work in the reverse order, doesn't that mean that 5 times 2 must equal 10? Right?
Okay.
What if I did 10 divided by 0? And I'm looking for the answer, so I'm going to call it X.
I don't know what the answer is. I'm looking for it.
Doesn't that mean, following this, that my missing number that I'm trying to find times 0 must equal 10?
But this is how we work backwards from division, right? However, you're right. But what number times 0 is 10? There is no such number exists. Okay?
So we just simply say it's undefined.
There is none. So right beside Julia, there's something on the board there. Friends don't let friends divide by 0. What about 0 divides 0? Apply the same reasoning. Zero divides 0. One would think, okay, well, we're dividing by 0, so it's going to be undefined. So that's a possible answer. But we're dividing 0 by a number, and 0 divide anything is always 0. So 0 is a possible answer. Or maybe there's another answer.
Let's do this again. 0 divides 0. I don't know what the answer is. I'm trying to find it.
So I'm going to call it X. That means working backwards.
X times 0
Must equal 0.
That's working backwards from division.
You can always change a division statement into a multiplication. So what number times 0 is 0? 0, 1, -1, 2.
It's over.
Yeah.
X can be any number. So a lot of time,
So 0 divides 0 is anything.
or sometimes what we say, if it's all numbers that go on forever and ever and ever, some people like to do the fancy infinity.
Means every single number, positive, negative, even fractions, even decimals, even numbers that don't repeat or don't end, anything. So keep that in mind when you're dividing with 0. 0 divide a number is 0, but you can't divide by 0. You can divide 0 by a number, but you can't divide by 0.
Okay, I'm gonna leave it at that. I know we only have a couple pages left.